Everyone, welcome to the weekly briefing with Cloak and Dagger. We've got Albert Marco and myself, Tony Nash. This week it's been all about tariffs and equities and other stuff. So we're gonna dive into it. Both Albert and I have been posting about tariffs all week, so you can see our timelines for kind of some specific stuff about tariffs. But here's the list of things that we're going to cover today, and we're going to do it kind of quickly. It's a lot, okay? Tariffs, China, Taiwan, stocks, debt, gold, and the Fed, okay? So it's going to be really busy. We're going to be all over the place. So Albert and I have pretty different views on tariffs, and that's fine. I love it. Albert, what's your view of what's going on with tariffs?
Well, I mean, mine are more on the political side, but also a little bit on the economic side. I mean, the tariffs are being used as an instrument to force debtors away from the issuance that Janet Yellen left Basant and force them into the 10-year and longer paper. On top of that, there are, positions of negotiating points and starting negotiating points for multiple issues facing different countries, Canada, Mexico, China, the EU, so on and so forth. I mean, remember, these are reciprocal tariffs. They're not like we just got together with Basant and Lutnick and Trump and drank 20 beers and threw darts at a board and
Right.
picked them.
Which some people are acting like. They're like the
Well,
calculation
I mean,
of
they
this
can act.
isn't.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they act like that because they don't know how things work. They
Yep.
just they want to. They have political biases and they throw things out. Whatever. But I just, I wish that this was a little bit more calculated, right? In the delivery, the delivery to the media and to the public. I wish that it wasn't as fast of a market plunge as we're experiencing right now. I mean, just today, Powell came out and did not sound like he's playing ball with Trump at all, right? He called the tariffs inflationary and whatnot. So most likely, the market's going to be heading into like the 4900s because of that.
48.50. That's what we said a couple weeks ago, and you told me I was crazy.
I just, I didn't think that it would be this violent. You got to understand. So the more violent this move in the markets are, the more of a political problem it becomes for Trump, right? And that's where my my opposition to these tariffs come, because there's midterm fundraising is starting now. They happen in 12 months. As it's going right now, it's going to be a slaughter for the GOP. If things don't turn around, right? And all the stuff that Trump is talking about in his policies, although are good in the long run, that doesn't get you elected in the near term, right? People have, 401ks, they have portfolios, jobs, so on and so forth. And all this affects it. And it's just, a little bit difficult to stomach at the moment.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think you could get movement in long bonds without this radical of a change in direction.
Oh,
So
I agree.
I think the tariff discussion is an instrument. It's a multi-headed instrument. Part of it is revenue. Okay. Part of it is getting foreign direct investment. Part of it is hitting China and Europe. And part of it is a radical change so that we have a very quick turn on debt, right?
Yep.
So the debt duration is the biggest problem that we have as a government, and they had to do something radical to get the duration on debt changed. And this was it. So I'm sitting back. Do I love the short term, meaning 2 to 10 week impacts of this? I don't. But equity markets generally are where they were in August of 24, all-time highs up to that point, right? So we still have companies like Palantir that are trading at 400 times earnings. So until we see Palantir not at 400 times earnings, we're still, in pockets, we still have massive overinvestment. As I've said many times, I see Palantir as a consulting firm. They're not a software firm; they're a consulting firm. And so, when you have a consulting firm trading at 400 times, It's a problem for equity markets. And so people will figure that out over time, but they just haven't yet. And so they're going to the typical names and selling off the typical names, and then they're going to get these favorites, these very specific favorites that people have. And then once the bottom falls out of those, it'll go down pretty dramatically.
Yeah,
So
I mean, you make a point. Now, listen, a lot of this has to do with Basant wanting to fix the Mag 7 pump scheme that Biden used,
yep,
right? That has to get sorted out. And
yep,
that's going to be pain, especially for tech. But on the
that's right.
flip side is after Powell doesn't play ball, right? It's like, you're going to have to rally the market. What do you do to rally the markets but use tech? So, I mean, they're a little bit in a catch-22 at the moment because of Powell, but by and large, I totally agree with you. I mean, things have to be, things had to get a little bit chaotic for Basant to justify ending QT, which
Yep.
which is going to happen at some point. On top of that, these tariffs, as we mentioned many, many times, the revenue that these tariffs generate are being put into the budget for the tax cut, to be able to fund the tax cut, so there's no cost. When the tax cut vote comes up, I think in May or June or whatever it is.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're not as radically different I mean, I do think that I don't think this is hitting people as hard, meaning I don't think people are as against this as some of the extremists on social media we're seeing. I think a lot of people are looking back going, yeah, I mean, I didn't realize China had a 70% tariff against us. And so we're putting, or whatever it is, and then we're putting 50% of that against them. So, okay, I mean, I'm okay to go along with this because again, I put out a post saying China can't afford, I think it's what, 53 or 57% tariffs. They can't afford to subsidize that. They
No,
can,
they can't. Let's just be honest. They put more reciprocal tariffs on us. What do we export to China? LNG and soybeans? Who cares?
well, it's a lot of
Yeah,
ag stuff, right? And
yeah, I
so
understand that, but they have a problem with where are they going to get ads to cover for their
yeah.
needs?
So we
South
saw in
America.
the first Trump administration, they switched some of their soy to Brazil and Argentina, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
those ag swaps have happened. So where the ag is, what ag they're buying from the US, they kind of have to buy that from the US. There isn't another global source for it generally.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so, it's how much damage can they do, right? They have to buy soy from us. And it's largely for animal feed and other stuff. They have to buy sorghum from us. They have to buy, this type of stuff. And, so it's not as if we're selling, yeah, we are selling some sophisticated high-end stuff to them, but for the most part, a lot of it's ag and they have to buy it from us. It's not like you can't buy that stuff from us. So, but Brazil is our biggest competitor. And so they'll buy what they can from Brazil, but Brazil's already selling a lot to them. And China's put in over the past 24 hours a lot of non-tariff barriers, some of it around chicken, and they're investigating a couple of US companies and these sorts of things. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
all predictable. Like, of course, it's predictable. And, my question, whenever, China put a reciprocal tariff on our reciprocal tariff. And so the question, when people ask, so when the US puts a tariff on somebody, they say, why would America tax itself? But they don't ask the same question when China tariffs the US, right? So why would
Mhm.
China tax itself? If that's the thinking, or does that thinking only apply when the US puts a tariff on people?
Well, it only applies to the U.S. Anything politically, economically, whenever you talk about the U.S., the rules and the narratives change dramatically. You
Of course.
take out the country names and just put country A, B, and C, and you
Yep.
give these scenarios, right?
Yep.
It's a whole different ball game. But
Yeah,
because
China's
it's
perfectly justified to tariff us, but when we do it, we're punishing ourselves. Like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, of
I mean,
course.
okay, so I want to dig into China a little bit, and I'm working on a piece. I was curious about revenue generation for the central government in China and what kind of, they have to borrow to be able to fund their government. So people believe that China is this bulletproof entity that plans long and does amazing stuff, and they'll outfox the US at every turn. And they don't run a balanced budget. they have to raise about $1 trillion every year to balance their budget. So I'll have a piece coming out next week on Cloak and Dagger looking into that. How do they raise money? What do they do? And how much do they have to borrow? And it's a problem for them. And some of that borrowing is in US dollars. And so again, I know, Albert, we've covered this many times over the years. I've seen so many people over the last 48 hours say, well, all China has to do is sell their bonds and they'll crush the US.
That's a stupid argument. I hate when it comes up. It's nonsensical. You know what I mean? That without dollars, the renminbi hyperinflates. So we all know this.
Yep.
It's a dumb, lame argument.
Yep. And then one of the other things that people say is, well, China will just devalue CNY to sell more into the US. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't see. That comes with other problems. I mean, they have other problems with debt and real estate and other sectors within the Chinese economy that would be affected if they devalue. So I don't know how they can do that. I mean, I'm sure. I don't know if they even try it. I mean, they might, but there's also a lot of negatives for them to do that. On top of that, it just looks weak.
It looks weak.
It looks
Yep.
weak for Xi Jinping more than anything else, and he can't really afford to look weak at a time like this.
You can't. And if it goes to 10, it's going to 15. And if it goes to 15, it may go to 35. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Where does it stop? That's the real problem with deval of CNY once you start it. So nobody really knows where it's going to end. Okay, so earlier this week, China started a live fire exercise around Taiwan, right? And so, I believe that was partly done because of these inter-Chinese government wrestling matches we have between the PLA and Xi Jinping, because the PLA guys are hardliners. But I believe it was also done as a distraction for Trump. Like, is China going to invade Taiwan, or are they going to be muscular if Trump puts more tariffs on China? And he did it anyway. So how much of a factor do you think that type of exercise, or China being more muscular toward the Philippines or other people that 2 weeks ago they were muscular toward Japan? How much of a factor is that in this tariff discussion?
Zero.
Okay.
I just don't. I don't think that we take seriously any type of invasion of Taiwan or Philippines by China right now. I mean, it's more about maybe a face saving or showing to the public that we're still here and blah blah blah. But I don't see. I really don't see what China could accomplish and why the United States would even care by a few drills that they do routinely for the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
I just don't take
this. I do get the sense that they're getting more serious. And I know that people on the ground in Taiwan, whereas a year or two ago they would have dismissed it, they're wearing the people down in Taiwan. The Taiwanese are starting to feel like it's a possibility. And there are very specific discussions happening at the government level about arming people. So people being able to buy handguns and buy weapons and hold them in their house. So these are starting to be public conversations in Taiwan.
That's a different strategy and topic altogether. I mean, what we discuss here in the West is all-out invasion of the powerful PLA Navy and amphibious assault on an island and blah blah blah. That's what we just talked about now is more of subversion tactics over the long term, which they have been doing. There's no question.
Of course, Australia, Taiwan, Japan, US, Canada, you name it.
Yeah, I mean they're good at that, especially regionally. Most effective in Taiwan and other areas in Singapore and whatnot. But I mean that's a whole different thing. What we discuss is what I dismiss is all out warfare on the Taiwan island.
Yeah,
right. That I dismiss. Now the subversion part, you can see it.
It's already working, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into stocks and debt and gold and the Fed. So in terms of financial markets, so do you think 4,800 is possible on the S&P?
I think 4,700 is possible on the S&P. I think that's fair market value with everything that's gone on, what's been said by Powell and the acceleration of the sell-off. Right? I do think it is. I mean, listen, the faster this goes down and the lower it goes down, the less the chances are for the Republicans to retain majority in the House come midterms, right? So Trump and Besant better really, really take a look at what they're doing and what they say and what they can do, and at least pump or reverse this to a point where it's stable, instead of this just dramatic, historic sell-offs day after day.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to have some sort of news early next week about people like Vietnam and Thailand and people coming to agreements. I mean, he's already said that they've come to him for discussions. I think we're going to have some announcements early next week where some of these countries are being peeled off one by one. And then once that starts happening, it's prisoner's dilemma, right? If you want to export to the US, you have to start having more structured discussions with the US.
Yeah, I mean, listen, over the weekend, I assure you there's going to be emergency back channel phone calls and, talking to connections to DC by multiple nations, Europe, Asia, I'm sure the phone lines and the dinner tabs are going to be,
Pretty big.
prevalent.
Yeah. Okay. So do you think there's a chance of a Fed cut in April?
No,
No.
I think inflation is problematic now. That if the Fed starts to cut too early, you can see 7, 8, 9% inflation, and that's a political nightmare, economic and political nightmare for everybody. So I don't think that Powell is going to play ball with that. Even today, his words were, "I'm not going to, tariffs are inflationary." How can he cut when they're worried about inflation? It's just not. Those are two opposite stances.
Do you think there's a possibility that he starts to buy more MBS on their balance sheet to lower long rates?
Yeah, I mean they have before. I don't see why they wouldn't do it now. I mean that's this whole gimmick is to, like I said, ruin Mag 7
Yep.
and push the short dated issuance into longer dated.
Yep.
I mean the short date's getting absolutely butchered.
Yep.
Less so than the longer. It's pushing everybody there, doing exactly what they want to do. It's
Right.
just I object of the speed,
Yeah.
right? The speed
So
of the rate.
yeah, my contention is they can't do it at any other speed. They have to do it this fast to get
Oh,
the shock
that's
effect.
tomato, right?
Yeah,
Tomato,
but
tomato.
but just so for people watching, MBS is mortgage-backed securities, and what I'm asking is the Fed going to buy more mortgage-backed securities on their balance sheet so that they can help Besant lower the long-term interest rates? Because that's really what he wants. He wants the 10 and 30-year down so that he can refinance short-term debt into longer-term debt. So, if the Fed refuses to lower interest rates, they can buy long dated debt and put it on their balance sheet, which would help out the Treasury to reduce long term debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so that's a possibility. And, I've said for a month or so that I think the Fed's going to start lowering in May. This was before all the tariff stuff. I was saying it because I think the first estimate in markets was June. But I said it's possible that they start in May. And we'll probably have 3 or 4 this year. Now, we're seeing gold off a little bit by about 3%, and I see people in markets saying, well, people are selling gold because they're getting margin calls on their equity,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
it's probably part of it. Yeah, there's no question. Another is probably just profit taking. I mean, why would you not take profit here? Most of these people bought gold at like 1,700, 1,900, 2,100.
Right,
I mean, why
exactly.
would you not take it at 3,000? That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
You know,
exactly. And so do you expect that we'll hear about any funds blowing up?
no, I think that they sorted them out beforehand. I mean, I think that I think funds most likely got back doors into funding and cover some losses, so we don't have Lehman style events
There
happening.
was that, I think there was that talk last week about the Fed is considering opening up a facility for hedge funds during the next, market.
Oh man, they already got that. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. They already have that shit. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So, Albert, what are you looking at going into the weekend? We've had a dramatic week. What are you looking at going to the weekend and next week?
My focus will be what the European rhetoric will be on tariffs, not so much as an EU wide mouthpiece because nobody cares about the EU, but individual nations like France, Germany, Ireland, the UK, and what their words are on tariffs, and if they start to negotiate and deal separately instead of as a union. right? That would be very, very interesting. On top of that, the drop in oil into the 50s, as somebody said, was
You
going to
did.
happen.
You did. You called that one really well.
I didn't. Yeah, I just didn't know that this was going to be the, the trigger for it. But
Yeah.
on top, because the oil is dropping. I mean, WTI will be in the 50s. Brent will be low 60s. Russian euros, you're looking at like mid to high 40s. So what is that? What does that do to the Russian position on the Ukraine war?
Yeah.
Really kind of want to see what Putin has to say about any potential ceasefire in the headwinds of oil and commodities being shredded.
Yep. So just going back to your Europe point, who do you think would negotiate individually? Of course, the UK would. They're not a part of the customs union, but who do
Ireland.
you think Ireland would?
I think Ireland has a lot to lose here. I mean, they got a hefty tax, and their economy is always fragile. So I think that the Irish need to look out for themselves in this respect and not be a pawn to Paris and Berlin and cut a deal.
Italy, Netherlands, you think either of those would?
Not so much maybe the Netherlands. I mean, Italy surely.
Huge trade center, right?
Yeah, a huge trade center. Netherlands, I'm like 50-50 on the Netherlands. I mean, on one hand, I know
I
that
know what you think of the Dutch.
as much as as much as my disdain for the Dutch is, they are shrewd business people, right? They're very shrewd, uh, consistent. I mean, you get what you deal with. I mean, you
Yep.
just get what you get with the Dutch, right?
Yep.
I just hope that the more globalist view is put aside for what's right for the country, right?
Mhm.
What's right for the Dutch.
Yep.
So I mean, I would give them a 50-50 chance because there's a lot of globalists in power there. So I don't know. I mean, obviously Poland probably cut a deal with the
Poland.
U.S.
Go back to Italy. Did you say anything about Italy?
Italy would. Maloney is she just doesn't
Pro-American.
care. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
pro U.S. pro cap. She just doesn't care what the
Yep.
EU or Brussels have to say.
Yep. India's already talking to the US. So I know India's not a huge trade partner, but yeah, I think it matters that
Big
things are
enough.
happening there. So it's big enough. Gasoline is down 5%, crude oil is down 4%, copper is down 10%, 9%, something like that. So, I think for inflation, and I saw that live cattle was down, limit down today. So,
Mhm.
I think getting some of these commodity prices broken is something that they've been trying to do as well. And so it's not terrible to see some of these commodity prices down because again, all that flows through to inflation numbers.
I don't remember if I don't remember if I mentioned it right on our podcast here, but when the Atlanta Fed came out and said oil in the 50s would achieve the Fed's 2% inflation target, right? Immediately my ears perked up. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, is that a fact? So I think that people are going to be quite surprised, and the markets will be quite surprised in the coming 2 or 3 CPI releases of it being a lot cooler than people are speculating. So I don't, that oil, target of mine in the 50s and the commodities that you mentioned is done for a reason, right?
Of
It's
course,
to
it's
cool
all
to
done to
cool
pull
down.
down
See,
inflation.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
cooled down inflation, which will rally the markets, and things should be hunky dory for Trump. I mean, that's the script. What
Yeah.
happens, we don't know.
Yeah. One of the things I also, before we close off, I want to talk about, remind people of China. We've been saying since November, China's going to have a very adversarial relationship with the US for 3 to 6 months. So we're at the 3 month point. So we've got a few months left. I do not expect an agreement with China,
No,
um, over the weekend or in April or whatever. I
no, no,
think
no.
I
You'll
think we're
see.
going to have a lot of agreements with other people, Japan, Korea, other major trading partners, Vietnam, all that stuff is going to come around. But I don't believe we're going to have a magic moment with China until the end of the summer. I just don't think that's going to happen.
No, I agree with you. I think the Chinese is a different animal to negotiate with. I mean, we need to have teams meet in person to talk. That's just the way things are done with the U.S. and China, right? They're going to have trade teams lined up already on both sides, and probably already picking venues of where to meet,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the way it works with them.
And I guarantee you, because I've known these guys, I guarantee you they did not think Trump would do this. China absolutely did not believe that he would levy these tariffs up until the moment he did it. They did not believe it. Because
Oh,
they
I
don't
agree.
believe that American politicians have the backbone to do this type of stuff. So up until the last moment, they didn't have a plan. It was a possibility, but they did not have a plan.
No, and you can see how primitive they are because for many years I've noted that the Chinese hit certain U.S. companies inside of China whenever they're stressed. They target agriculture when they're stressed with the U.S. Right, because they think that politically that's damaging, and 90% of the time it is. But the problem is, after COVID, all those links have been broken between the Senate and the rural voters and whatnot, especially with Trump coming into play. Everything's been jumbled about and it's yet to be organized in a way where you can map which voters and constituents are directly tied to political entities like the Senate or the
Yep.
president, right? So a lot of the stuff that worked pre-COVID doesn't work right now.
Yep. That's absolutely right. So good. So let's end it on that. I know we've been all over the place and chaotic, and that's great. It's been a chaotic week. So if you're watching, you have comments, put them below. If you have topics you want us to cover, put them below, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Albert. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tony.